Maya Chen walked through the glass doors of First National Bank on a Tuesday morning. She wore jeans and a simple black sweater. Her canvas bag hung from her shoulder, looking ordinary to everyone around her. But inside that bag was a small camera, carefully hidden and already recording everything. She was 28 years old and had spent the last 2 years of her life on one project. She wanted to show the world something that many people refused to believe still existed. Maya was making a documentary about racism in banks. Not the obvious kind that people could see easily, but the quiet kind that happened behind closed doors and polite smiles. The bank was busy that morning. People stood in line at the teller windows. Others sat in the waiting area, filling out forms. Maya walked past all of them toward the desk where loan officers sat. She had an appointment with Richard Morrison. He was a loan officer who had worked at this bank for 15 years. Maya had done her research on Richard. He had a good record with the bank. Customers generally liked him. On paper, he seemed like a professional person who did his job well. But Maya had heard stories from other people. Stories about how he treated white customers differently than black customers. She was here to see if those stories were true. A woman at the front desk smiled at Maya. "Do you have an appointment?" "Yes, with Richard Morrison." "My name is Maya Chen." The woman checked her computer and nodded. "He'll be with you in just a moment. Please have a seat." Maya sat down in one of the leather chairs in the waiting area. She adjusted her bag slightly, making sure the hidden camera had a clear view. In her ear was a tiny device that looked like a hearing aid. Through it, she could hear her production assistant, Sungmin Park, who was sitting in a car outside the bank. He was monitoring the audio and video feed from her camera. "Sound is good," Sungmin's voice whispered in her ear. "Video is clear. Remember to stay calm no matter what happens." Maya didn't respond. She couldn't without looking strange. Instead, she took a deep breath and looked at the folder in her lap. Inside were all her documents. Her credit report showed a score of 780, which was excellent. Her tax returns from the last 3 years showed she made $120,000 each year from her documentary production company. She had a detailed business plan for expanding her company. She had bank statements showing healthy savings. She had everything a loan officer could possibly want to see. "Maya Chen?" A man's voice called her name. She looked up to see Richard Morrison standing near his desk. He was in his early 50s with gray hair at his temples. He wore a dark blue suit and a red tie. He smiled at her, but Maya noticed something in his eyes. A quick moment of surprise, maybe. Or was it disappointment? She had seen that look before. "That's me," Maya said, standing up and walking toward him. Richard shook her hand. His grip was firm but brief. "Please sit down. I'm Richard Morrison. I'll be reviewing your loan application today." Maya sat in the chair across from his desk. She placed her bag on the floor beside her, angled so the camera could capture both of them. "Thank you for meeting with me." "Of course," Richard said, settling into his chair. He opened a file on his desk. "So you're applying for a small business loan. Is that correct?" "Yes, $50,000. Maya handed him her folder of documents. "Everything you need should be in here. My credit report, tax returns, business plan, bank statements." Richard took the folder but didn't open it right away. Instead, he looked at Maya with an expression she couldn't quite read. "And what kind of business do you run exactly?" "I own a documentary production company. I've been running it for 5 years now. We create documentaries for streaming platforms and educational institutions." "Documentaries," Richard repeated. He said the word slowly, like he was tasting something he wasn't sure about. "That's an interesting field. Is it profitable?" Maya kept her voice steady. "Yes. As you'll see in my tax returns, I've made over $100,000 each year for the past 3 years. This year I'm on track to make even more." Richard finally opened the folder. He looked at the first page, which was her credit report. His eyebrows rose slightly. 780 credit score. That's quite good. "I pay all my bills on time," Maya said simply. Richard flipped through the pages, but he seemed to be moving quickly. Too quickly to really read anything. Maya noticed he spent only a few seconds on her business plan, which she had worked on for weeks. "So," Richard said, leaning back in his chair, "why do you need this loan? If your business is doing so well, why not use your own savings?" It was a fair question, but something about the way he asked it felt wrong. Maya had expected this question and had an answer ready. "I want to purchase new equipment and hire 2 more full-time employees." The loan would allow me to grow faster while keeping my savings as a safety net. It's standard business practice. Richard nodded, but his expression didn't change. I see, and these documentaries you make, who watches them? Is there really a market for this? Maya felt a small spark of anger in her chest, but she kept her face calm. Yes, there's definitely a market. We have contracts with major streaming platforms. Our last documentary was watched by over 2 million people. Richard said. He looked down at her tax returns again. And this income, it all comes from your documentary work? Yes, all of it. Richard asked, looking up at her. You don't have any other sources of income? Maya knew what he was really asking. He wanted to know if someone was giving her money, if maybe her parents were supporting her. It was an insulting question, especially since her documents clearly showed where her income came from. All of my income comes from my business, Maya said firmly. It's all documented in those tax returns you're holding. Richard set the papers down on his desk. I have to ask these questions. It's part of my job to understand an applicant's full financial picture. I understand, Maya said, though she didn't believe that was the real reason for his questions. Richard picked up her business plan and flipped through it quickly. This expansion you're planning, it seems ambitious. Have you considered starting smaller? Maybe just buying one piece of equipment instead of all this? Maya had laid out a careful, reasonable plan for growth. Nothing about it was too ambitious. I've thought it through carefully. The plan is realistic based on my current income and projected growth. Still, Richard said, setting the business plan aside, in my experience, small businesses often overestimate their growth potential, especially in creative fields like yours. I have 5 years of steady growth, Maya reminded him. My projections are based on actual trends, not hopes. Richard folded his hands on his desk. What about a cosigner? Do you have someone who could co-sign the loan with you? Maybe your parents? There it was. The assumption that she couldn't possibly be successful on her own. That someone else must be behind her success. I don't need a co-signer, Maya said. My credit is excellent. My income is more than sufficient. I have substantial savings. There's no reason for a co-signer. It would strengthen your application, Richard said. He said it like he was being helpful, but Maya heard something else in his tone. My application is already strong, Maya replied. Richard shifted in his chair. He glanced at her documents again, then back at her. Look, I'm just trying to be realistic with you. The bank has certain standards. We have to be careful about who we lend to. This is a significant amount of money. $50,000 for someone making $120,000 a year is not unreasonable, Maya said. For some people, no, Richard said. But every situation is different. Your industry is unpredictable. Documentaries, streaming content, these things come and go. The bank needs to know you'll be able to pay back this loan even if your business has a slow year. Maya felt her jaw tighten. She had shown him 5 years of consistent income. She had excellent credit. She had savings. What more did he need? What would you suggest I do differently? Maya asked. Richard sighed like he was dealing with someone who wasn't understanding something simple. Maybe you should look for investors instead. You know, people from your community who understand your business. They might be more willing to take a risk on this kind of venture. People from your community. Maya knew exactly what he meant by that. I'm not looking for investors, Maya said. I'm applying for a standard business loan. I meet all the qualifications. Richard picked up all her documents and tapped them on his desk to straighten them. I'll need to review all of this more carefully. The bank will need to do its own assessment of your business viability. This isn't a decision I can make right now. How long will that take? Maya asked. A few weeks, probably. We'll send you a letter with our decision. Maya stood up. She knew what that decision would be. She had known from the moment Richard first looked at her. Thank you for your time. Richard stood as well. Of course. We'll be in touch soon. Maya picked up her bag and walked out of the bank. Her heart was beating fast, but she kept her expression neutral until she was outside. She walked 2 blocks to where Sungmin was parked and got into the car. Did you get everything? She asked. Sungmin was already reviewing the footage on his laptop. Every word, every look. Maya, this is exactly what we needed. Maya leaned her head back against the seat. She felt tired suddenly, tired from staying calm while being insulted, tired from being polite while being dismissed, but mostly she felt determined. Good, she said, because this is just the beginning. Maya's apartment was small, but she had turned it into a workspace that fit her needs. The living room was filled with editing equipment, computers, and stacks of files. The walls were covered with notes, timelines, and photographs. This was where she and her team worked on the documentary that would change everything. Sungmin sat at one of the computers, playing back the footage from the bank. Maya's producer, James Kim, stood behind him, watching the screen carefully. James was 52 years old and had been making documentaries for almost 30 years. He had won awards. He had exposed corruption, injustice, and hidden truths. When Maya first told him about this project, he immediately wanted to help. "Watch this part," Sungmin said, pointing at the screen. "See how his whole face changes when she tells him about her income?" James leaned closer. On the screen, Richard Morrison's expression shifted from polite interest to something else. Doubt. Suspicion. It was subtle, but it was there. "He doesn't believe her," James said quietly. "Even though he's holding proof in his hands, he doesn't believe her." Maya stood by the window looking out at the street below. She had watched the footage 3 times already. Each time made her angrier and sadder at the same time. He asked if her parents would co-sign. Maya said without turning around, "Like I'm a child who can't handle money. Like my 5 years of business success mean nothing." "It's the same pattern we've seen in every other case," James said. He walked over to a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were reports, documents, and more hidden camera footage. 30 cases over the last 6 months. All different banks. All the same story. Maya finally turned from the window. "Show me the comparison again." Sungmin switched to a different file on his computer. This footage was from 3 weeks earlier. It showed a white woman named Sarah Collins sitting in the same bank in front of the same desk, talking to the same loan officer. Sarah was one of Maya's colleagues, another documentary filmmaker. She had agreed to help with the project by applying for a loan with identical qualifications to Maya's. Same credit score, same income, same amount requested. Everything was the same except the color of her skin. In the video, Richard Morrison smiled warmly at Sarah. He looked through her documents with interest. He nodded approvingly at her business plan. "This looks excellent," Richard's voice came from the speakers. "Your business has strong growth potential. I don't see any problems with approving this loan." Maya watched as Richard spent real time reading Sarah's business plan. He asked thoughtful questions about her work. He never questioned whether her income was real. He never suggested she get a co-signer. He never told her to start smaller or find investors from her community. "How long did her appointment take?" Maya asked, though she already knew the answer. 23 minutes, Sungmin said. "Yours took 11 minutes. He spent half the time with you and still managed to be insulting." James closed the folder he was holding. "We have 47 documented cases now, Maya. 47 times where qualified Black, Latino, and Asian applicants were rejected or discouraged, and we have comparison cases for 30 of them, showing white applicants with the same or worse qualifications being approved. First National Bank is the worst," Sungmin added. "They have the biggest gap between their approval rates." Maya sat down at the table where they held their team meetings. "Tell me about the other banks again." James pulled up a chart on his laptop and turned it so Maya could see. "We tested 5 banks total. First National, Pacific Trust, Community Savings, Metro Bank, and United Financial. All of them showed racial bias in their lending. But First National is the most extreme. They approved white applicants at a rate 42% higher than equally qualified minority applicants." 42%, Maya repeated. "That's not an accident. That's a system." "Exactly," James said. "This isn't about individual bad employees. It's about policies, training, and culture that allow this to happen." Maya's phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up and saw an email notification. It was from First National Bank. Her heart beat faster as she opened it. "It's the decision letter," she said. Sungmin and James moved closer to read over her shoulder. The letter was formal and polite. It thanked Maya for her application. It explained that after careful review, the bank had decided not to approve her loan request. The reason given was insufficient business viability for the requested loan amount. "Insufficient business viability," Maya read aloud. "I've been running a successful business for 5 years, but my business isn't viable." "But Sarah's identical business was perfectly viable," Sungmin said bitterly. Maya set her phone down. "We need to go back." James looked at her. "Back to the bank?" "Yes, but this time no hidden cameras. This time we go in officially." We tell them we're filming for a documentary. We bring a lawyer. We show them what we have and see what they say. They'll deny everything, Sungmin said. Probably, Maya agreed. But their denials will also be on camera, and we'll see how they react when they know they're being watched. James nodded slowly. It's risky. Once you do this, there's no going back. This becomes public. You become the face of this documentary. Maya had thought about this many times. Making this documentary meant making herself vulnerable. It meant experiencing racism on purpose and letting the world watch. It meant reliving painful moments over and over while editing the footage. But she kept thinking about her mother. Ji-won Chen had come to America from Korea when she was 25. She was smart, talented, and ambitious. She studied architecture and graduated at the top of her class. She had dreams of starting her own architecture firm and designing buildings that would stand for generations. But when Ji-won applied for business loans to start her firm, every bank turned her down. They said her business plan wasn't strong enough. They said the market was too competitive. They said she should work for an established firm instead of trying to start her own. Maya had been 8 years old when her mother finally gave up on that dream. She remembered her mother sitting at the kitchen table late at night crying quietly. She remembered her father holding her mother and looking angry and helpless at the same time. Ji-won ended up working for other architects for her entire career. She was talented enough that she should have been leading projects and making decisions. Instead, she spent 40 years working for other people, watching them take credit for her ideas. I know it's risky, Maya said to James. But my mother spent her whole life wondering if things would have been different if she had been white, if she had a different name, if she spoke without an accent. She never got answers to those questions. I can give answers to other people asking the same questions now. James smiled. Then let's do it. I'll call Jennifer Park and see if she can be our legal counsel for this. Jennifer Park was a civil rights lawyer who specialized in discrimination cases. Maya had interviewed her earlier in the project, and Jennifer had been eager to help in any way she could. Over the next 2 weeks, Maya and her team prepared for their return to First National Bank. They compiled all their evidence into a presentation. They obtained the proper permits for filming in public spaces. They notified the bank officially that they would be conducting an on-camera interview about their lending practices. The bank tried to refuse at first. They said they didn't comment on individual loan decisions, but Jennifer explained that they had the legal right to film in the bank's public areas and to ask questions about their experiences as customers. The bank eventually agreed to a meeting with Maya, but they set conditions. The meeting would be in a private conference room. Only bank management and their legal counsel could be present. No other customers or employees could be filmed. Maya agreed to these terms. She didn't need to film other customers. She only needed to film the bank's response to what she was about to show them. The night before the meeting, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about what might happen. The bank could threaten to sue her. They could call security and force her to leave. They could simply refuse to engage with her evidence, or maybe they might actually listen. Maybe they would see what she saw in the footage. Maybe they would recognize that something was wrong and want to fix it. Maya knew she was being too hopeful, but part of her needed to believe that change was possible. Her phone lit up with a text message. It was from her mother. "I'm proud of you," the message said. "No matter what happens tomorrow." Maya felt tears in her eyes. She texted back, "I'm doing this for you, Mom. I wish you had gotten the same chance." "You're giving that chance to others," her mother replied. "That's what matters." The next morning, Maya dressed carefully. She wore a professional black suit and tied her hair back. She wanted the bank to see her as serious and credible. She wanted them to know this wasn't a game. Her team met her outside the bank at 9 in the morning. James and Sungmin were there with professional camera equipment. Jennifer Park arrived in a gray suit carrying a briefcase full of documents. Sarah Collins came too to show the comparison between her experience and Maya's. "Everyone ready?" James asked. Maya took a deep breath. Inside her bag was a laptop containing all their footage, their data, their evidence. This was 2 years of work. This was hundreds of hours of research, interviews, and planning. This was her mother's broken dream and the broken dreams of countless others. "I'm ready," Maya said. They walked through the glass doors of First National Bank together. This time Maya wasn't hiding. This time she wanted everyone to see exactly what she was doing. The conference room at First National Bank was cold and sterile. A long table sat in the center with chairs around it. The walls were plain white with no decorations except the bank's logo. Maya thought the room felt like a place where bad news was delivered and difficult conversations happened. Susan Williams, the bank manager, sat at the head of the table. She was in her 50s with short blonde hair and a nervous smile. Next to her sat the bank's legal counsel, a man named Thomas Reed who wore an expensive suit and kept his face completely blank. And then there was Richard Morrison, the loan officer who had rejected Maya's application. He sat with his arms crossed, looking like he wished he was anywhere else. On Maya's side of the table sat Jennifer Park, her lawyer, and James Kim, her producer. Sungmin operated the camera from the corner of the room. The red light on the camera was visible to everyone, a constant reminder that everything said in this room would be recorded. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us," Maya began. She kept her voice calm and professional. Susan nodded, her smile still fixed in place. "Of course. Though I must say we're not entirely sure what this is about. Your email mentioned a documentary about banking practices." "That's correct," Maya said. She opened her laptop and turned it to face the bank officials. "For the past 2 years, I've been investigating racial discrimination in lending practices at banks across this state. First National Bank is one of 5 banks we've tested." The smile disappeared from Susan's face. "I'm sorry, tested?" "Yes," Maya said. "We sent applicants with identical qualifications to apply for loans. The only difference between the applicants was their race. We documented how each applicant was treated and whether their loans were approved." Thomas Reed, the lawyer, leaned forward. "Ms. Chen, I hope you're not suggesting that this bank engages in discriminatory practices." "We follow all federal lending laws." "I'm not suggesting anything," Maya replied. "I'm showing you evidence." She pressed play on the video file. The footage from her hidden camera began to play. On the screen, Richard Morrison looked through her documents with barely concealed skepticism. The audio played clearly through the laptop speakers. "And this income, it all comes from your documentary work?" Richard's voice asked. "Yes," Maya's voice answered. "All of it? You don't have any other sources of income?" Maya paused the video. "This is from my loan application meeting 3 weeks ago. As you can see, Mr. Morrison questioned whether my documented income was real, even though he had my tax returns right in front of him." Richard's face had gone pale. "I was just doing my job. I asked those questions to all applicants, do you?" Maya asked. She clicked to another video file. This one showed Sarah Collins, the white filmmaker, sitting in the same chair. "This is Sarah Collins. She applied for the same loan amount with the same qualifications 1 week before I did. She also met with Mr. Morrison," the video played. Richard smiled warmly at Sarah. He reviewed her documents with interest and never questioned whether her income was real. "Your business has strong growth potential," Richard said on the video. "I don't see any problems with approving this loan." Maya paused the video again. "Mr. Morrison spent 23 minutes with Ms. Collins and approved her loan application immediately. He spent 11 minutes with me and rejected my application. We had identical credit scores, identical income, identical business plans. The only difference was our race." The room was completely silent. Susan Williams looked from the laptop screen to Richard Morrison. Thomas Reed was writing notes on a legal pad, his face still showing no emotion. "This is just one case," Richard said defensively. "You can't judge an entire bank's practices based on one comparison." "You're right," Maya agreed. "That's why we didn't stop at one comparison." Jennifer Park reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick document. She slid it across the table to Susan. "This report contains data from 47 loan applications at First National Bank over the past 6 months. We have documented proof that white applicants are approved at a rate 42% higher than equally qualified Black, Latino, and Asian applicants." Susan picked up the report with shaking hands. She flipped through the pages, her eyes getting wider with each page. "This can't be right," she whispered. "It is right," Maya said firmly, "and we have video evidence for 30 of those cases. Recordings of how loan officers treat white applicants versus minority applicants. The pattern is unmistakable." Thomas Reed held out his hand and Susan passed him the report. He read through it more slowly, his expression finally showing some emotion. He looked worried. "Where did you get this data?" he asked. "Public records request," Jennifer answered. "Federal law requires banks to report loan applications and decisions by race. We compared those reports to our test applications and interviews with real customers who gave us permission to share their experiences. This is taken out of context, Richard said loudly. He was getting angry now. Every loan decision is based on individual circumstances. You can't just compare numbers and call it discrimination. Maya turned to look at him directly. Then explain to me, Mr. Morrison, why you told me to find investors from my community instead of giving me a loan. What did you mean by my community? I just meant, other people in the documentary business, Richard stammered. That's not what you meant, Maya said. And we both know it. Ms. Chen, Thomas Reed interrupted. Let's say, hypothetically, that there were some irregularities in our lending practices. What exactly do you want from this bank? Maya had prepared for this question. I want 3 things. First, I want First National Bank to conduct an independent audit of your lending practices and release the results publicly. Second, I want mandatory bias training for all employees who interact with loan applicants. Third, I want the bank to establish a fund to help minority business owners who were unfairly denied loans. That's ridiculous, Richard said. You're trying to extort this bank. I'm trying to fix a broken system, Maya corrected him. But let me be clear about something. I don't want money for myself. This documentary is going to be released whether you cooperate or not. I have a contract with a major streaming platform. This story will be told. The only question is whether First National Bank will be portrayed as part of the problem or part of the solution. Susan Williams looked like she might cry. How long have you been planning this? 2 years, Maya answered. This started when I learned about my mother's experience trying to get a business loan 20 years ago. She was an architect with excellent qualifications, but every bank turned her down. She spent her entire career working for other people because she couldn't get the funding to start her own firm. I wanted to know if things had changed. If banks had gotten better at treating everyone fairly, and you found that they hadn't, Jennifer added. We found that discrimination still exists, Maya said. It's just quieter now. More polite. Hidden behind words like business viability and market concerns. But it's still discrimination. Richard Morrison stood up suddenly. I don't have to listen to this. I've been a loan officer for 15 years. I've helped hundreds of people get loans. I'm not a racist, Maya looked up at him calmly. I never said you were. But racism isn't just about individual beliefs. It's about systems and patterns. It's about unconscious biases that affect decisions. You might genuinely believe you treat everyone the same, but the evidence shows that you don't. The evidence, Richard said mockingly. You mean your edited videos? You probably filmed 10 meetings and only showed the ones that support your narrative. We filmed 47 meetings, Sungmin spoke up from behind the camera.
And we have the full unedited footage of every single one.
Would you like to see all of it? Richard sat back down, but he was breathing hard. He looked at Susan and Thomas like he was waiting for them to defend him. Thomas Reed closed the report and folded his hands on top of it. Ms. Chen, I need to be frank with you. What you're describing could result in serious legal consequences for this bank. Before we discuss any potential cooperation, I need to consult with our senior management and legal team. I understand, Maya said. In the meantime, Thomas continued, I would appreciate it if you would delay releasing this documentary until we've had time to investigate these claims internally. Maya shook her head. I can't do that. The documentary is scheduled to premiere in 3 months. My contract with the streaming platform has already been signed. Surely you could ask for a delay, Susan said. Give us time to fix things before you expose them publicly. Why? Maya asked. So you can fix things quietly and pretend there was never a problem? So you can protect your reputation while the people you discriminated against get nothing? That's not what I meant, Susan said quickly. The thing about sunlight, Maya said, is that it's the best disinfectant. Problems that are hidden stay hidden, but problems that are exposed have to be dealt with. That's the whole point of journalism. Jennifer Park spoke up. My client is offering First National Bank an opportunity to be proactive, to acknowledge the problem and take steps to fix it before the documentary airs. That would reflect much better on the bank than simply denying everything and looking defensive. Thomas Reed was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'll need to take this to our board of directors. This isn't a decision I can make alone. How long will that take? Jennifer asked. A few days, maybe a week. Fine, Maya said, but know that we're not stopping our work. We'll continue documenting and investigating, and if we find evidence that First National Bank is trying to cover things up or intimidate witnesses, That will also go in the documentary." Richard Morrison suddenly laughed. It was a bitter, angry sound. "This is unbelievable. You walk in here with your hidden cameras and your accusations, and you act like you're some kind of hero. Do you have any idea what this could do to people's careers? To their lives?" Maya met his eyes. "Do you have any idea what your decisions did to people's lives? My mother never got to pursue her dream because of people like you. How many other people gave up on their dreams because a loan officer decided they weren't worth the risk?" "I make decisions based on facts," Richard said. "No," Maya replied. "You make decisions based on facts and biases. And until you can admit that, nothing will change." Susan Williams stood up abruptly. "I think we need to end this meeting. This is getting too heated." Maya closed her laptop and stood as well. "Thank you for your time. My lawyer will be in contact about next steps." As Maya and her team gathered their things, Thomas Reed spoke one more time. "Ms. Chen, off the record, what would you say is your ultimate goal with this documentary?" Maya paused at the door. "The same goal as any documentary. To tell the truth. To make people see something they've been ignoring. And hopefully, to change things for the better." She walked out of the conference room with her head held high. Behind her, she could hear Richard Morrison's angry voice and Susan Williams' worried responses. But Maya didn't look back. In the bank's lobby, James put a hand on her shoulder. "You did well in there." "Did I?" Maya asked. She felt exhausted suddenly. "I'm not sure anything I said made a difference." "Give them time," Jennifer said. "Sometimes the truth takes a while to sink in." "And if they don't change?" Maya asked. Jennifer smiled. "Then the whole world will see exactly what kind of bank they are." Maya expected the story to stay quiet for a while longer. She thought she would have time to finish editing the documentary before anyone outside her team knew about it. But 3 days after the meeting at First National Bank, her phone started buzzing with news alerts. Someone had leaked the story. The headline on the local news website read, "Documentary filmmaker exposes racial bias in bank lending practices." The article didn't name First National Bank directly, but it had enough details that people in the industry would figure it out quickly. Maya sat in her apartment, reading the article on her laptop while her phone continued to buzz. Text messages, emails, calls from reporters, all flooding in at once. She felt overwhelmed and a little scared. This wasn't supposed to happen yet. She wasn't ready. James arrived at her apartment an hour later, carrying coffee and looking stressed. "Have you seen social media?" "No," Maya said. "I've been dealing with reporters calling me." James pulled out his phone and showed her. The hashtag Invisible Wall Doc was trending. That was the name of Maya's documentary, The Invisible Wall. Somehow people already knew about it. "How did this happen?" Maya asked. "Who leaked it?" "I don't know," James said. "But look at what people are saying." Maya scrolled through the posts. Hundreds of people were sharing their own stories of being denied loans despite having good credit and income. Black families who couldn't buy houses, Latino entrepreneurs who couldn't start businesses, Asian Americans who were told their applications needed extra review. The stories went on and on. "There are thousands of comments," Maya whispered, "all in just a few hours." "This is bigger than we realized," James said. "This isn't just about First National Bank or even the 5 banks we tested. This is about a problem that affects millions of people." Maya's phone rang again. This time it was a number she recognized. It was Susan Williams from First National Bank. "Ms. Chen?" Susan's voice was tight and controlled. "I assume you've seen the news?" "I have," Maya said. "But I didn't leak the story." "I don't know who did." "It doesn't matter who did," Susan replied. "The damage is done. Our bank is being flooded with angry calls and emails. People are threatening to close their accounts. The board of directors is in emergency meetings." "I'm sorry that's happening," Maya said carefully. "But maybe it's a sign that people care about this issue. The board has asked me to inform you that First National Bank is placing Richard Morrison on administrative leave while we conduct an internal investigation." Maya felt a small surge of satisfaction but also sadness. "That's a start. We're also releasing a public statement denying any systematic discrimination in our lending practices," Susan continued. "Of course you are," Maya said. "Ms. Chen, I'm calling to ask you to please consider delaying your documentary. Give us time to handle this properly. If you release it now in the middle of all this attention, it will destroy our bank's reputation." Your bank's reputation is being destroyed by your bank's actions, Maya said. Not by my documentary. Susan was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I hope you can live with the consequences of what you're doing. The line went dead. Susan had hung up. James looked at Maya. What did she say? Richard Morrison is on administrative leave, and they're going to deny everything publicly. We expected that, James said. Banks always deny first. Over the next few days, the story grew bigger. A reporter from a major newspaper wrote a detailed article about Maya's investigation. Civil rights organizations started calling, offering support and documentation of similar discrimination at other banks. The NAACP contacted Maya with files showing patterns of lending discrimination across the country. The Asian American Legal Defense Fund shared data about Asian applicants being stereotyped as risky, despite high credit scores. Latino advocacy groups provided testimonies from hundreds of families who had been denied mortgages. Maya's small apartment couldn't handle all the attention and information. James arranged for them to rent a larger office space where they could work and meet with people. The new office had 3 rooms, big tables, and walls where they could organize all their research. On the 4th day after the leak, First National Bank released their public statement. Maya read it on their website, feeling angry with every word. First National Bank takes all allegations of discrimination seriously, the statement read. We have conducted a preliminary internal review and found no evidence of systematic bias in our lending practices. We believe in treating all customers fairly regardless of race, ethnicity, or background. The isolated incident involving documentary filmmaker Maya Chen is being investigated, and the employee involved has been placed on administrative leave as a precaution. We remain committed to serving our diverse community with integrity and respect. Isolated incident, Maya read aloud. They're saying it was just one bad employee, not a pattern. Sungmin was at his computer working on editing more footage. Should we release some of the other videos? Show that it's not isolated? Not yet, James said. Let's wait until the documentary is closer to release. Right now we need to focus on finishing it properly. But Maya couldn't wait. She recorded a short video statement and posted it to social media. In the video, she sat in the new office with some of her evidence visible behind her. First National Bank wants you to believe that my experience was an isolated incident, Maya said to the camera. But I have documented 47 similar cases at their bank alone. I have footage showing patterns of discrimination that go far beyond one employee. And First National isn't unique. This problem exists at banks across the country. My documentary, The Invisible Wall, will show you the full truth. It premieres in 10 weeks. The video was watched 5 million times in 2 days. Major streaming platforms started calling. The platform that had originally contracted for the documentary offered more money to make it longer. Other platforms wanted to buy the rights entirely. Maya and James spent hours in meetings with executives who suddenly cared deeply about racial justice and investigative journalism. But the attention brought problems too. Maya started receiving threatening messages. Angry emails called her a liar and accused her of trying to destroy hardworking people's lives. Some messages were racist, using slurs and telling her to go back to where she came from. A few messages were disturbing enough that Jennifer Park advised Maya to report them to the police. This is the price of speaking truth, Jennifer told her. Some people will hate you for it, but many more will thank you. Maya tried to focus on the positive responses. She received hundreds of emails from people sharing their stories and thanking her for bringing attention to this issue. Young filmmakers told her she inspired them to pursue investigative journalism. People who had been denied loans said they felt validated, that they hadn't been imagining the discrimination they experienced. One email came from an older Korean woman named Sun-hee Park. She wrote, 25 years ago, I tried to get a loan to open a restaurant. The bank officer told me that Asian restaurants fail too often, and that I should work in someone else's restaurant instead. I ended up working in kitchens my whole life, making other people rich with my recipes. Thank you for showing that this still happens. Thank you for fighting. Maya printed that email and put it on the wall of her office. Whenever she felt overwhelmed or scared, she looked at it and remembered why she was doing this work. 2 weeks after the leak, Richard Morrison gave an interview to a conservative news website. Maya watched the video interview with her team, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. In the interview, Richard sat in what looked like his home office. He wore a sweater instead of his usual suit. probably trying to look more casual and sympathetic. "I'm the real victim here," Richard said to the interviewer. "I've worked at that bank for 15 years. I've helped hundreds of families get loans to buy homes and start businesses. I never cared about anyone's race. I only cared about whether they could pay back the loan. But now my career is destroyed because I'm being accused of racism by someone who was looking for racism everywhere she went." "What do you say to people who have seen the footage?" the interviewer asked. "That footage was edited to make me look bad," Richard answered. "She only showed the parts that fit her narrative. She didn't show the full context of those conversations. And she certainly didn't mention that I've approved loans for plenty of minority applicants over the years." "So you think this is about political correctness gone too far?" "I think it's about someone trying to make a name for herself by destroying someone else," Richard said. "This cancel culture has gone too far. People are so eager to find racism that they invent it where it doesn't exist." Maya paused the video. She felt sick to her stomach. "He's turning himself into the victim," Sungmin said. "Of course he is," James replied. "That's what people like him always do when they're caught. They claim they're being unfairly attacked instead of taking responsibility." "Should we respond?" Maya asked. "No," Jennifer said firmly. She had come to the office to watch the interview with them. "Don't engage. Let him talk. The documentary will speak for itself." But Richard's interview was picked up by other conservative media outlets. Soon Maya was being discussed on talk shows and podcasts. Some people defended her and praised her work. Others called her divisive and accused her of pushing a racial agenda. The bank employees' union released a statement supporting Richard Morrison. They said he was being unfairly targeted and that the union would fight to protect his job. The statement called Maya's documentary a one-sided attack on hard-working bank employees. Maya felt the weight of all this attention pressing down on her. She had wanted to expose injustice, but she hadn't fully understood how personal it would become. People weren't just criticizing her work. They were attacking her character, her motives, her integrity. One night, Maya sat in the office alone after everyone else had gone home. She pulled up the footage of her mother's interview that they had filmed months ago. Her mother, Jiwon Chen, sat in a comfortable chair in their family home. "Tell me about what happened when you tried to get a business loan," Maya's voice said from behind the camera. Her mother took a deep breath. "I was 32 years old. I had been working as an architect for 7 years. I had saved money. I had a business plan. I had everything ready to start my own firm. What happened when you applied for loans? The first bank told me that architecture firms are too risky for someone without more experience. The second bank said that the market was too competitive. The third bank officer looked at my name and asked if I spoke English well enough to communicate with clients." Her mother's voice cracked slightly. "I spoke perfect English. I had graduated from an American university, but he saw my Korean name and assumed I couldn't do the job. How did that make you feel?" Her mother was quiet for a long moment. "It made me feel like I didn't belong here. Like no matter how hard I worked or how qualified I was, I would always be seen as different, as less than. Do you think things have changed since then?" Her mother looked directly at the camera with sad eyes. "I hope they have, but I'm not sure. That's why I'm glad you're making this documentary. Even if it hurts to talk about, people need to know that this happens. They need to understand what it feels like to have your dreams dismissed because of how you look or where you come from." Maya wiped tears from her face as she watched the footage. This was why she was doing this work. Not for fame or attention, not even really for herself. She was doing it for her mother, and for all the other people who had been denied opportunities because of discrimination. Her phone buzzed with another news alert. Federal banking regulators had announced they were launching an investigation into First National Bank's lending practices. The investigation was prompted by Maya's evidence and the public attention to the issue. Maya smiled through her tears. Maybe, just maybe, something good would come from all of this. 3 months had passed since Maya walked into First National Bank with a hidden camera. Now she stood backstage at the Sundance Film Festival, about to present The Invisible Wall to the world. Her hands were shaking. She had presented films before, but never anything this personal or important. The documentary had grown from the 6 episodes she originally planned to 8 full episodes. Each episode focused on a different aspect of lending discrimination. The first episode told Maya's own story at First National Bank. The other episodes explored housing discrimination, the wealth gap, historical context, and stories from dozens of families affected by biased lending. James stood beside her, adjusting his tie nervously. The theater is completely full. Standing room only. There are reporters from every major news outlet waiting to talk to you after the screening. I think I might throw up, Maya said. You'll be fine, James assured her. This is what we've been working toward. The festival coordinator appeared and gave them the signal. It was time. Maya and James walked onto the stage. The theater erupted in applause. Maya looked out at the sea of faces and felt overwhelmed. These people had come to see her work, to hear the stories she had spent 2 years collecting. Thank you all for being here, Maya said into the microphone. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. This documentary began with a simple question. Has anything really changed in how banks treat people of different races? I thought I knew the answer, but I needed proof. What you're about to see is that proof. Some of it will make you angry. Some of it will make you sad, but I hope all of it will make you think about what kind of country we want to be. The lights dimmed. The documentary began. For the next 4 hours, the audience sat in almost complete silence. Maya watched from the back of the theater, studying people's reactions. She saw people nodding in recognition. She saw tears on faces. She saw anger in clenched jaws. When the footage of Richard Morrison dismissing Maya's loan application played, she heard gasps from the audience. The documentary didn't just show Maya's experience. It showed the parallel testing they had done with Sarah Collins. It showed interviews with economists explaining how lending discrimination creates wealth gaps that last for generations. It showed historical footage of redlining, a practice where banks literally drew red lines on maps around minority neighborhoods and refused to lend there. Most powerfully, it showed interviews with real families. A black couple who couldn't buy a house despite having better credit than their white friends. A Latino man whose business failed because he couldn't get the loan he needed to compete. An Asian woman who was told she was too risky, despite never missing a payment in her life. And it showed Maya's mother, Jiwon Chen, telling her story for the first time publicly. When that segment played, Maya had to leave the theater for a moment. It was too emotional to watch with so many people. When the documentary ended, the audience stood and applauded for 5 minutes straight. Maya returned to the stage with her team feeling dazed. People were crying. People were cheering. Some people were already on their phones, tweeting about what they had just seen. The question and answer session after the screening lasted 2 hours. People wanted to know everything. How did Maya gather her evidence? Was it legal to use hidden cameras? What happened to Richard Morrison? What did the bank say after they saw the documentary? Maya answered each question honestly. Richard Morrison was fired from First National Bank 3 weeks ago. The bank tried to make it about his individual actions, but federal investigators found evidence of systematic problems. Susan Williams, the bank manager, resigned. The bank is facing a $15 million fine from federal regulators. Do you think firing one person solves the problem? Someone from the audience asked. No, Maya said firmly. This isn't about one person or even one bank. This is about how our entire financial system has been designed in ways that disadvantage certain groups of people. Firing Richard Morrison is a start, but real change requires new policies, better training, and constant monitoring. A young black woman stood up to ask a question. I tried to get a mortgage last year and was rejected. After seeing your documentary, I think I was discriminated against. What should I do? Maya felt the weight of that question. People were looking to her for answers. Document everything. Save every email, every letter, every record of your application. Contact a civil rights lawyer. Organizations like the NAACP and the National Fair Housing Alliance have resources to help people who have experienced lending discrimination, and file complaints with federal regulators. Your voice matters. The woman nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you for making this. I thought I was crazy for thinking it was about race. Now I know I wasn't imagining it. That moment made everything worth it for Maya. All the stress, all the threats, all the difficult conversations. It was worth it to help even one person understand they weren't alone. After the screening, Maya was surrounded by reporters. Camera crews and journalists pushed microphones toward her face. Everyone wanted a statement, a quote, something they could use for their stories. Ms. Chen, what do you say to critics who claim your documentary is one-sided? I say that reality is one-sided, Maya answered. The data doesn't lie. Banks approve loans for white applicants at significantly higher rates than equally qualified minority applicants. That's not an opinion. That's a fact backed by federal data and my own investigation. Do you think you'll face legal consequences for your hidden camera recordings? My lawyers are confident that what we did was legal, Maya replied. We were documenting discrimination, which is a matter of public interest. The law protects journalists who expose wrongdoing. Richard Morrison says you destroyed his career. Do you feel any responsibility for that? Maya took a deep breath before answering that one. Richard Morrison destroyed his own career by discriminating against loan applicants. I simply documented what he did. If exposing racism destroys someone's career, maybe they shouldn't have been racist. The next day, the invisible wall was the top trending topic on social media. Everyone was talking about it. News shows played clips. Celebrities tweeted about it. Politicians referenced it in speeches. The streaming platform that had bought the documentary released all 8 episodes at once. Within 1 week, 30 million households had watched it. It became one of the most watched documentaries in streaming history. But the attention brought new challenges. Maya's phone never stopped ringing. She was invited to speak at universities, conferences, and corporate events. Congress announced they were holding hearings on discriminatory lending practices and wanted Maya to testify. I'm not qualified to testify to Congress, Maya told James one evening in their office. She was exhausted. She hadn't slept properly in days. You're the most qualified person, James argued. You did the research. You have the evidence. You're the reason Congress is even paying attention to this issue. I'm just a filmmaker, Maya said. I'm not a policy expert or an economist. You're more than a filmmaker now, James replied. Whether you wanted it or not, you've become the face of this movement. Maya didn't want to be the face of a movement. She wanted to make documentaries and tell stories. But she realized she didn't have a choice anymore. The story had grown beyond her control. She started receiving invitations to speak that she couldn't refuse. She traveled to universities where students wanted to learn how to do investigative journalism. She met with civil rights organizations that wanted to use her research in their own work. She advised lawyers who were filing discrimination lawsuits against banks. But Maya also started to struggle with the pressure. She had spent 2 years researching and filming, working long hours and living on a tight budget. Now she was suddenly in demand, constantly traveling and speaking and being in the public eye. She was exhausted and overwhelmed. One night she broke down crying in a hotel room after giving a speech. She called her mother. I can't do this anymore, Mom, Maya sobbed. Everyone wants something from me. Everyone has expectations. I just wanted to make a good documentary. I didn't want to become some kind of activist leader. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You opened a door, Maya. You showed people a truth they needed to see. Now they want you to help them walk through that door. It's overwhelming, I know. But it's also powerful. You're changing things. I'm just one person, Maya said. One person who did what millions of others only talked about. Her mother replied, You took a risk. You faced discrimination on purpose to prove it exists. That took courage. Now people need you to be courageous a little bit longer. Maya wiped her tears. How long? I don't know, her mother admitted. But not forever. Eventually the spotlight will move on. Other stories will become important. But right now this is your moment to make a difference. Don't waste it. The MacArthur Foundation called 2 weeks later. They were awarding Maya a Genius Grant for her investigative journalism and documentary filmmaking. The grant came with $625,000 over 5 years, no strings attached. Maya sat in her office staring at the email announcing the grant. James and Sungmin stood behind her, reading over her shoulder. This is incredible, Sungmin whispered. This changes everything, James added. You can make any documentary you want now. You have the freedom to choose your next project. But Maya felt conflicted. She was grateful for the recognition and the money, but she also felt like people were only valuing her work because it was controversial. Would anyone care about her documentaries if they weren't about discrimination? What if I want to make a documentary about something completely different? Maya asked. What if I want to make a film about art or music or nature? Then make it, James said. You've earned the right to tell whatever stories you want. But Maya knew it wasn't that simple. People had expectations now. They wanted her to keep exposing injustice and fighting discrimination. If she moved on to lighter topics, would people think she was abandoning the cause? A message appeared on her computer. It was from a group of minority business owners who had been denied loans by First National Bank. They were organizing a class action lawsuit and wanted to use Maya's documentary as evidence. The lead plaintiff was a black woman named Angela Morrison, who had been denied a loan to expand her bakery despite having excellent credit and a successful business. Maya agreed to meet with Angela and her lawyers. They met at a coffee shop near the courthouse where the lawsuit would be filed. Angela was in her 40s with kind eyes and flour still on her apron from working in her bakery that morning. "Thank you for meeting with me," Angela said. "I watched your documentary 3 times. The first time I cried. The second time I got angry. The third time I decided to do something about it." "Tell me your story," Maya said. Angela explained that she had tried to get a loan to buy new equipment and open a second location for her bakery. Her credit score was 795. Her bakery was profitable. She had a solid business plan. But First National Bank rejected her application, saying her business model was too risky. "The loan officer kept asking me questions about where I really got the money to start my first location," Angela said, "like he couldn't believe I had saved it myself. He suggested I apply for a smaller loan from a community development bank instead. I didn't understand what he meant until I saw your documentary. He was telling me to go to a bank that specifically serves black communities because he didn't want to lend to me at his bank." Maya felt the familiar anger rising in her chest. "That's exactly the kind of thing we documented." "Did you keep records of your application?" "Every email, every letter, every piece of paper," Angela confirmed. "My lawyer says we have a strong case, especially now that federal investigators have confirmed First National Bank has a pattern of discrimination." The lawsuit was filed 2 days later. 37 other minority business owners joined as plaintiffs. They were all people who had been denied loans by First National Bank, despite having qualifications equal to or better than white applicants who were approved. Maya's documentary was cited extensively in the legal filing. The footage she had captured became key evidence. The data her team had collected supported the plaintiff's claims. 1 year had passed since Maya walked into First National Bank with a hidden camera. The world looked different now, or maybe Maya just saw it differently. She stood outside the same bank on a cold morning, but this time she carried a professional camera and had permission to be there. Things had changed at First National Bank. The name was still the same, but almost everything else was different. New management had taken over after the federal investigation. The bank had paid a $15 million fine to the government. They had established a $50 million fund to help minority business owners who had been denied loans in the past. Maya was there to film a follow-up segment for her documentary. She wanted to show people what happened after the investigation. She wanted them to see if real change was possible. Angela Morrison met her in the lobby. The same Angela who had been denied a loan for her bakery. Today Angela was smiling. She carried a folder of papers under her arm. "I never thought I'd walk back into this bank," Angela said. "But here I am. How does it feel?" Maya asked, her camera recording. "Strange," Angela admitted, "but also like justice. This bank told me no last year. Today they're saying yes." Angela had received approval for her business loan through the bank's new minority business fund. The loan would allow her to buy new equipment and open 2 more locations for her bakery. She wasn't the only one. Over 200 minority business owners had received loans through the program in the past year. Maya filmed as Angela met with a new loan officer, a young black man named Marcus Williams, who had been hired as part of the bank's diversity initiative. Marcus treated Angela with respect and professionalism. He asked intelligent questions about her business plan and seemed genuinely interested in helping her succeed. "This is what banking should look like," Maya said later, reviewing the footage with her team. People being treated fairly regardless of their race. But Maya knew the story was more complicated than one happy ending. She had been traveling across the country for the past year, documenting the ripple effects of her documentary. Some changes were good. Many states had passed new laws requiring banks to report their loan approval rates by race publicly. 23 states now had these laws. Federal regulators had increased oversight of lending practices, but there was still resistance. Some banks fought the new regulations in court. Some politicians called the reforms government overreach. And discrimination still existed, even if it was quieter now. Maya had interviewed over 300 people affected by lending discrimination in the past year. She met families who had lost their homes. She met entrepreneurs who had given up on their dreams. She met young people who didn't even bother applying for loans because they assumed they would be rejected. One of those interviews changed everything for Maya. She met a 16-year-old girl named Hannah Kim at a high school in Los Angeles. Hannah approached Maya after a speaking event. "I watched your documentary 5 times, Hannah said. I want to be an investigative journalist like you. I want to expose injustice and make things better." Maya looked at this young girl with determination in her eyes and saw herself 10 years ago. "What kind of stories do you want to tell?" "All of them," Hannah said. "Stories about discrimination, about corruption, about things that people try to hide. My parents immigrated from Korea like yours did. They work so hard, but they still struggle. I want to understand why and show other people." Maya spent the next hour talking with Hannah about journalism, about filmmaking, about the challenges and rewards of this kind of work. She gave Hannah her email address and told her to stay in touch. "You inspired me," Hannah said as she was leaving. "You showed me that one person really can make a difference." After that conversation, Maya started a mentorship program. She reached out to young filmmakers and journalists from minority communities and offered to teach them investigative journalism skills. She wanted to help create the next generation of storytellers who would continue this work after she moved on to other projects, because Maya was ready to move on. She had been working on documentary projects about lending discrimination for 3 years now. She was tired. The emotional toll of constantly dealing with racism and injustice had worn her down. She needed to tell different kinds of stories for a while. Her production company had grown to 15 employees. They were developing documentaries about healthcare discrimination, educational inequality, and housing segregation. Important topics, but Maya wanted James and her other team members to lead those projects. She was ready to step back. "I want to make a documentary about my mother," Maya told James one evening in their office. "About her life, her dreams, and what it means to be an immigrant in America. Not focused on discrimination, just focused on her as a person." James smiled. "That sounds beautiful. You should make it." "But what if people are disappointed?" Maya asked. "What if they think I'm abandoning the fight against discrimination?" "You're not abandoning anything," James said. "You've done more in 3 years than most activists do in a lifetime. You've changed laws, changed policies, and changed how millions of people think about lending discrimination. You've earned the right to tell whatever story you want." Maya received an unexpected phone call 2 weeks later. It was from Richard Morrison, the loan officer who had rejected her application and started this whole journey. "I don't expect you to want to talk to me," Richard said when Maya answered, "but I'm hoping you'll hear me out." Maya almost hung up. But curiosity stopped her. "I'm listening." Richard explained that he had spent the past year in therapy and anti-racism training. Not because the bank made him, but because he genuinely wanted to understand his own biases. He had gotten a job at a non-profit organization that educated financial professionals about implicit bias. "I want to apologize," Richard said. "Not a fake apology where I make excuses. A real apology where I take full responsibility. I discriminated against you and countless other people. I caused real harm. I'm sorry." Maya was silent for a long moment. She didn't know what to say. Part of her was still angry at Richard, but another part of her appreciated that he was trying to change. "Thank you for apologizing," Maya finally said. "I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'm glad you're trying to do better." "Would you be willing to interview me for your documentary?" Richard asked. "Let me talk about what I did wrong and what I learned. Maybe it could help other people recognize their own biases." Maya thought about it. Showing Richard's transformation could be powerful. It could demonstrate that change was possible even for people who had caused harm. "I'll think about it," Maya said. She did think about it, for days. She talked to her team, her mother, and her lawyer, Jennifer Park. Everyone had different opinions. Some thought giving Richard a platform was wrong. Others thought it showed the possibility of redemption. Maya decided to do the interview, not for Richard's sake, but because it served the story. The documentary had always been about showing the full truth, and the truth was complicated. Yes, there were people like Richard who discriminated, but there were also people who recognized their mistakes and worked to change. The interview was difficult. Richard was honest about his actions in ways that made Maya uncomfortable. He talked about how he had made assumptions about applicants based on their race, without even realizing he was doing it. He talked about the unconscious biases he carried from growing up in a mostly white community where stereotypes were common. I thought I wasn't racist because I didn't use slurs or join hate groups, Richard said. But racism isn't just about obvious hatred. It's about the small decisions I made every day. Who I trusted, who I doubted, who I helped and who I dismissed. I was racist and I hurt people because of it. Maya asked the hard questions. Do you think losing your job was fair? Yes, Richard answered without hesitation. I abused my position of power. I denied people opportunities they deserved. The consequences I faced were appropriate. The interview footage became part of a special episode Maya created about accountability and change. It was controversial. Some people praised Maya for showing the complexity of the issue. Others criticized her for giving Richard attention and sympathy. Maya learned to accept that she couldn't please everyone. The important thing was that she told the truth as honestly as she could. The Emmy Awards ceremony was held on a warm evening in Los Angeles. Maya wore a silver dress her mother had helped her choose. When The Invisible Wall won the Emmy for Outstanding Documentary, Maya walked to the stage with her team. James Sungman and Jennifer Park all stood beside her. Maya looked out at the audience of television professionals and celebrities. She thought about how far she had come from the day she nervously walked into First National Bank with a hidden camera. This documentary wasn't made in a studio or with a huge budget, Maya said into the microphone. It was made in my small apartment by a small team of people who believed that showing the truth could make a difference. We documented something that many people wanted to stay hidden. We faced criticism, threats, and legal challenges, but we kept going because the story needed to be told. She paused and looked directly at the camera. One documentary can't solve centuries of discrimination, but it can start conversations. It can make people see things differently. It can inspire others to take action. That's what I hope we've done. The audience applauded. Maya felt her mother's pride from the front row where she was sitting. After the ceremony, Maya announced her next project. She was making a documentary about successful models of equitable lending. She wanted to show people that alternatives existed. Credit unions and community development banks that prioritized serving underserved communities. Financial institutions that had figured out how to be profitable while also being fair. We've spent enough time showing the problem, Maya said in a press conference. Now I want to show solutions. 6 months later, Maya stood in front of a newly opened community center in the same neighborhood where Angela's expanded bakery was located. The community center had been funded by one of the business owners who received a loan through First National Bank's Minority Business Fund. Inside the center, children took classes in art, music, and technology. Adults attended job training programs and financial literacy workshops. The center employed 30 people from the community and served hundreds of families every week. Maya filmed the opening ceremony with a smile on her face. This was what change looked like. Not perfect, not complete, but real. Money that had been denied to a business owner because of discrimination was now flowing back into the community, creating opportunities for the next generation. Hana Kim, the 16-year-old girl who had approached Maya at the high school event, was there too. She was interning with Maya's production company, learning how to film and edit documentaries. She followed Maya around with a notepad, asking questions and taking notes. Do you think we're winning? Hana asked Maya. The fight against discrimination? Maya thought carefully about her answer. I think we're making progress. The fight isn't over, and it probably never will be completely over. But we're moving forward. More people understand the problem now. More people are working to fix it. That's what winning looks like in this kind of fight. Small victories that add up over time. And what about you? Hana asked. Are you going to keep making documentaries about discrimination? Sometimes, Maya said, when the story needs to be told. But I'm also going to make other kinds of documentaries. Stories about joy, about culture, about the beautiful parts of life. We need those stories too. Maya's mother launched her own architecture firm that same month. At 60 years old, Jiwon Chen finally pursued the dream she had abandoned 30 years earlier. She had saved enough money from her career, and the success of Maya's documentary had inspired her to take the risk. Maya filmed her mother's first day in her new office. Jiwon looked around the space with tears in her eyes. I waited so long for this, Jiwon said. I thought the opportunity had passed me by forever. But here I am. What would you say to other people who had to give up on their dreams because of discrimination? Maya asked from behind the camera. Jiwon looked directly at the lens. I would say it's never too late. The people who told you no were wrong. You are capable. You are worthy. And the world needs what you have to offer. Don't give up. That footage became the final scene of Maya's documentary series. It ended not with anger or sadness, but with hope. With the image of a woman finally living her dream after decades of waiting. The documentary had started with a question. Has anything really changed? Now Maya had an answer. Yes, but not enough. Progress was real, but the work was far from finished. Maya stood outside First National Bank one last time, camera in hand. The building looked the same as it had 2 years ago, but everything about it was different. Different leaders, different policies, different culture. Not perfect, but better. She thought about all the people she had met during this journey. Angela and her successful bakery, the hundreds of other business owners who finally got the loans they deserved, Hannah and the other young journalists she was mentoring, Richard Morrison and his uncomfortable but necessary transformation. And she thought about her mother, finally living her dream. Maya packed up her camera and walked away from the bank. She had other stories to tell now. Stories about art, about music, about the immigrant experience, about all the complex and beautiful parts of human life. But she knew she would come back to stories about injustice when needed. Because showing the truth even when it was uncomfortable was what journalism was all about. And Maya Chen was a journalist who wasn't afraid to shine light into dark places. The invisible wall she had documented wasn't completely gone, but it had cracks now. And through those cracks, light was beginning to shine.